Welcome everyone to Being Patient's Live Talk series. Today we have a dementia research specialist at Arizona State University's Edson College of Nursing and Health Innovation, Berta Carbajal, with us to speak to us about her journey of caregiving for her late mother, Sylvia Vasquez, who lived with dementia, as well as her work in dementia research. And this live talk is part of our series, Diversity in Dementia, which is produced by Being Patient with support provided by ESI. So Berta, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're quite welcome.
So Berta, I wanted to ask you, what first inspired you to, join the field of dementia and, do research in dementia and become a research specialist, especially yes. Within the Latino community?
Absolutely. Well, obviously, as you and I have talked and have had the opportunity to visit, my motivation was my mother. I took care of my mother the last 4 years of her life. She passed away in 26 years ago in September, this past September. And unfortunately, during that time, there were no programs that I knew of or was aware of, any type of a support system that could have helped me maneuver her care, as well as the fact that I was caring for my family, raising, my daughters, and I had a full-time job. So between, I was doing a juggling act, but as I've stated so many times, I just could not even imagine anyone else caring for my mother. She was very young when she, suffered a high blood pressure stroke. The first one was at 42, and then she had multiples after that. And of course, the last few, strokes, she began, to show symptoms of dementia. And of course, her doctors and everyone told me that this was all from the strokes that she had suffered. So it was a very, very difficult, stressful, sad, concerning time, to see what was happening, to my mom. And so, I was working for U of A and then ASU in another, capacity as promotora or as a community health worker.
And this is after your mom passed away.
Yes, it was after my mom passed. I began, I was offered an opportunity to work as a community health worker, a Promotora de Salud. And, this is something that, I learned from the best. I always tell everybody I learned from my mother and my grandmother. That model is tradition. It's a traditional model, centuries old. These are the go-to people in the community. So anyways, I accepted a position to work with U of A at first and then transitioned to ASU, but in the arena of education and cancer. So when I was approached to see if I could recommend or refer a promotora to work with a program under the directorship of Dr. Kuhn called Momento Crucial, which had to do with families, caregivers, Mexican and Mexican-American descent families, which I am, a Mexican-American. And when I read, the project, I thought, I'm doing this. I'm gonna apply for the position because I'm gonna do it in my mother's memory. Because it was very difficult, juggling everything. I wouldn't have it any other way, but I sure could have benefited from any and all support that I could have found during that time.
And before I ask you, more, before we delve into more about, your work in research currently and in the past with Momento Crucial, I wanted to, ask you more about, your caregiving experience and your mother. And, what were some of her early symptoms of dementia, like after she experienced her strokes?
Yeah, it was heartbreaking because the last, several years of her life, she had lost her hearing, to a stroke. And so, here she is at 50, 53, having to learn how to communicate by, writing, or we would write to her. And because, because of the dementia, she was not able to even learn how to sign. And a lot of the early symptoms of her dementia were, kind of repeating herself, insomnia. She couldn't sleep. She was restless, repeating herself, a lot of anxiety. And it was just so sad, to this day, when I think about it, I just get really, emotional because I saw her, her persona, her, disappearing. She would try really hard, to be herself, but it was kind of like, it was out of her control.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we talked about was, your mother's love for music, among other things.
Oh, yes.
And
yes.
even when she lost her hearing because of her stroke, she would still ask you and your husband.
Yes. We're a very musical family. Music has always been a very, very big, important part of our lives. Music was just everything. It was not just for fun and for happiness and for occasions, special occasions. It was for always. It was healing even. And she always had me in choirs. And as I grew up and grew older, I've always sung in church choirs. And then I happened to have married a wonderful musician, private musician, my husband, who plays the guitar, and she loved hearing us play and sing all her favorite folklore music and songs. And even when she lost her hearing, she would tell me, in Spanish, sit there and you and Jose, sing me this song and sing me that one, and she'd name all her favorites. Even in the early part of her losing her hearing, and even though she couldn't hear us, she'd watch my lips and just watch us. I've told people that I would sing with a knot in my throat because I wanted to be strong and happy, for her. And but yeah, she'd still want to hear or watch our lips as we sang her favorite songs.
Right. And one of the most difficult of the day in your life was having to move her into considered hospice.
Yeah, what's now considered as hospice, the time came, and she had suffered another major stroke, and she was on dialysis, and it just became more and more difficult for us to be able to transport her to dialysis, and to be able to have her even go on her own. It just became so difficult, and the doctors told me that I would have to prepare. That is and has been the most difficult memory, having to go take her and place her in a hospice setting. I mean, it was a wonderful facility. They cared for her. I had so many instructions for all the nurses and all the people there because I wanted her in specific outfits her jewelry, you know, her costume jewelry, her lipstick. As you can see, I inherited the love of red lipstick from her and my grandmother. And, you know, I had specific instructions, and I was there 2 or 3 or 4 times a day, making sure that all the instructions were being respected and followed until her passing.
Mm-hmm. So like even after she was in hospice, you were still there, very much taking a massive role in taking care of your mother.
Oh, yes. I was not about to leave her there and let go. There was no way. My mother was my friend. She was not just my mother, but she was my best friend, my confidant. She was my biggest fan. You know, yes, I wasn't going to do that. I had to be involved until the very last, you know, moment.
Right. And, you know, through this experience and this very challenging and painful experience too, like you're able to use this experience in your work right now, right?
Yes.
In dementia research. Can you tell us about, you know, how you've been able to use that experience in your job now?
Oh, yes, definitely. As I stated a few minutes ago, when I became aware of this position, you know, with a project called Momento Crucial, which means crucial moment, and it focused on interviewing caregivers and their loved ones, of Mexican descent or Mexican American descent, who I visited in their home, who they were caring for their loved ones in home, and discussing and contemplating the possibility of that crucial moment when you have to make the decision to place or not. And so, you know, because when I read that, you know, the project and the goals, I thought, I'm doing this in my mother's memory because I can relate wholeheartedly. And I want to do it in her memory, and I want to be able to share with families, not only as a promotora de salud, as a community health worker, but the fact that I was a caregiver. And for, you know, the last 4 years of her life and to the very end, and what it, you know, all the challenges as well as the benefits, and the stressors of caring for a loved one at home while trying to juggle the care of your family and if you work outside of the home and all that's involved with that. So as I read that, and so when that project, which by the way, and was the grant, we fulfilled the grant with outstanding outcomes. We were able, it is a educational research project, as all of our projects are. We were able to collect, you know, valuable data that has since, you know, helped us in the creation and in the securing of funding for different projects and programs to be able to, you know, provide caregivers with the workshops, the skill building workshops that we currently provide, to help maneuver a very challenging time for families with loved ones who are dealing with memory loss and dementia and Alzheimer's. That's a very, you know, it's a difficult diagnosis to accept and to deal with. And on top of that, you know, managing the changes that are going to come, and planning for the future. So, you know, it's very important to me and near and dear to my heart because, you know, it's a difficult diagnosis to begin with. And then, you know, not having the tools or the knowledge or the skills to maneuver the changes that are going to come. So I found it, when the Momento Crucial grant finished, you know, Dr. Kuhn fortunately says, I'd like to keep you on with my other projects. And I said, I'm here to stay as long as you've got a position and you've got projects on this issue. And he is another individual that is completely dedicated and committed because he helped care for a grandmother. Him and his mother cared for his grandmother who suffered from dementia. And recently his own mother is going through the dementia. So it's a subject matter near and dear to our hearts. And I believe that that makes all the difference in making our programs so successful.
Right. And through, you and your team's research from Momento Crucial and your ongoing research now, what are some of the main challenging, but also like the positives of caregiving that you've learned, specifically within the Latino community? That can you share with us some of the learnings?
Yes. Well, families have expressed to us over and over again when we've been able to, in the last 2 years, we haven't been able to do much in person, okay, because of the pandemic. But prior to that, the prior years, we've always had such a positive outcome from our focus groups with caregivers and their loved ones. They've always said, oh gosh, are we gonna, are we gonna meet again? It's almost like they've been able to learn from other caregivers. They've been able to share. They've been able to empower. They feel more empowered with the fact that they've acquired information and skills on how to manage the stress, how to manage the feelings of guilt if you have to leave to go to work, and leave them in the capable hands of a caring relative or a paid individual in some cases. So they've been so grateful, and we see the change. And so now with the pandemic, we've had to make many changes. And in research, we've been very challenged. You just can't make a change on a project that's a educational research project. What I mean by research is that as they provide input on the different workshops or on the different services that they receive, as the participants provide input, that's very valuable data. And so it helps us to continue, as I said, secure and confirm that there is a need for our type of programs in the community, especially the underserved community, people of color. And because all our projects are bilingual, with the exception of maybe one or two, but always we provide services in English and Spanish. And so in the last 2 years, we had to go back to the drawing board. Dr. Kuhn had to go back and start writing grants and in order to change and have virtual, workshops, provide, our projects virtually, for the safety of our families, as well as our staff, as well as our facilitators. And then if that's not enough, we had to come up with, a project to help our seniors and our loved ones, our caregivers, and help their loved ones, our seniors, maneuver, the tech world, with technology. Not all of our seniors have the internet. Not all of them have a computer. We have many that get by with a cell phone and emergency numbers and so forth. And so, it's a whole new way of addressing and attempting to reach our community of caregivers and their loved ones, which has been extremely challenging.
Yeah, on your point about, being involved in these research projects, that's been so important in understanding, the specific challenges within with caregiving. I wanted to ask you more about the Promotora de Salud model. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that model is and why that's important in dementia research?
Yes. When I applied, it's been probably over 15 years ago with Dr. Kuhn. I remember telling him, well, when I was offered the position, I informed him, I said, I come with baggage. And he said, what do you mean you come with baggage? And I said, well, I'm one of two promotoras that founded a network called the Hope Network, which stands for Helping Other Promotores Excel. And he said, oh, I know, I'm familiar with the Promotora model. I worked with Promotoras in California. I love, the model. I believe in it. And so I was very blessed and very fortunate that I, had a new director, a new supervisor who was familiar with the Promotora model, and that we have been collaborators ever since. And what that means is we've partnered. Our Hope Network is a partner agency under the umbrella of ASU and Dr. Kuhn's projects. The Promotora model, in English means community health worker. And it's nothing new. It's centuries old. And what it basically comes down to is these are trusted individuals in our community, embedded in the community, okay? These are your neighbors, these are usually your school volunteers, church volunteers. These are all people with a big heart who want to help their neighbor and who want to help in any way possible. So we created the Hope Network to be able to offer a platform, a gathering place, so to speak, quarterly, and hold annual events, all of which focused on providing educational opportunities, training opportunities, empowerment opportunities, networking opportunities, collaborating opportunities to the community of promotores who traditionally are volunteers and could benefit greatly by this type of a platform. So we started in 2009, we formalized it. But I mean, the service and the work, any position I've ever held for the last 40 years, I've always been a promotora. I don't care what the title was. It doesn't matter what they called me. I always worked as a promotora. And again, it's important because we work within communities and we create relationships of trust, and we are the go-to people. In other words, no matter what we may be bringing to them in our professional level, but as a promotora, it's always about hearing and listening to their needs. I may be there with the message about our caregiving, workshops and, our programs, but I'm also there to listen to whatever other needs there are. That's what makes the difference, is that we're not just there, with the message of our workshops. We're ready to listen and open up, any other resources that we can provide to them. We always share with other promotoras, when you go in or work with a family, you're going to be faced with a capirotada. What does that mean? Capirotada is a Mexican dish that's kind of like bread pudding, and it has everything but the kitchen sink in it. Okay, it has all kinds of bread and fruit and nuts and, oh my goodness, everything but the kitchen sink. Okay, well, when we go in or work with families, we are faced with a capirotada. So you may be there to take information on your projects, but you have to also be willing to listen to whatever else is happening there. And if you can help, you help. What happens in that process is you win their trust. They have confidence in you, and they are more receptive and more willing to work with individuals who have those skills and who provide that relationship.
And that trust is so important, because you mentioned to me that, for some Latino families, they can be
mistrusting.
Right, mistrusting.
Just say it.
Yeah, mistrusting of like bigger institutions like the government or.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, and within reason. Okay, this is from years of oppression and historical, which we won't go there. Okay, Nicholas. But yes, you're talking about a distrust. Not. I've had families tell me, "Well, you're with a government agency. Why are you? What are you going to do with all this information?" So you have to be ready and to explain and be honest. Be honest and upfront. What are you going to do with the data? And you always have to, as long as you're willing to inform and educate and provide the answer to the questions, you're going to make a friend forever, forever.
Right. And just on the last note, one thing you've mentioned is that, you learned from the best, right?
Yeah, I did.
The best is from
my grandmother and my mother. I remember being a child and watching my grandmother and my mother help their neighbors or help, in their community. They were always ready to go translate at the school for them, or to provide a ride to the food bank or to a clinic. I learned from the best.
Right, and those are the pillars of being promotora.
That's right. They are the pillars. They're the example.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Berta, for sharing your personal story and for your work in dementia research.
You're welcome. You're welcome for the opportunity. I'm always happy to talk about my beautiful mother, and I'm always happy when you're passionate about what you do. I'm ready to share it.
Thank you, Berta.
Thank you.
And for audience, if you miss any portion of this live talk, feel free to subscribe to our newsletter or go to our website at beingpatient.com. And thank you again, Berta.
You're welcome. Thank you, Nicholas.